My sister slapped my daughter across the face in front of everyone. She didn't whisper. She didn't hide it. She laughed a sharp, triumphant sound and said, "Like mother, like daughter, both are useless." My father smirked. My mother chuckled. And my 6-year-old daughter, Emma, stood frozen, holding the crayon she had just been using to draw. They thought it was discipline. They thought I'd shrink like I always did. But this time, they forgot something. The microphone was on, the one my brother-in-law had set up to film the Carter family legacy weekend. And what I did next didn't just change their smiles into silence. It turned my sister's polished, perfect life into a living hell. Because when you hurt my child, you don't just hurt a little girl. You wake the mother who remembers everything you've ever done. And this time, I remembered everything. Alexandra was always the golden child. From the moment we were little, she was the daughter who never raised her voice, who got perfect grades, who twirled on cue for company. I, on the other hand, was spirited, which was my parents' polite word for a problem. I asked too many questions. I laughed too loudly. I didn't fit their mold, and I paid for it in silence, punishment, and endless comparisons. While I was scolded for being distracting, Alexandra was praised for being graceful. While I struggled to be noticed, she soaked in every spotlight like it belonged to her by birthright. She went to Berkeley on a scholarship. I took community college night classes while working double shifts. She landed a 6F figure job in nonprofit PR, married a neurosurgeon, bought a townhouse in the suburbs. I got pregnant, young, worked admin jobs, and raised Emma by myself after her father walked out before her second birthday. But I was happy, and more than that, I was proud. Emma, my daughter, was everything I never had the courage to be at her age. Confident, funny, unfiltered. She sang wherever she went in grocery store aisles in the car while brushing her teeth. Her voice filled every corner of our modest apartment with joy. And yet deep down I worried, because I remembered how my voice had been flattened. I remembered how Alexandra would roll her eyes whenever I spoke up. How my mother would sigh and say, "Can't you be more like your sister?" How my father would grip my shoulder just a little too tight and whisper, "You're embarrassing yourself." I promised myself I'd never let anyone do to Emma what had been done to me. But then the invitation came an email from Alexandra titled, "Carter Family Legacy Weekend." It was a weekend retreat she had organized at their Lakeview Viewfront vacation home, complete with catered meals, a professional videographer, and as she put it, space to celebrate how far our family has come. A schedule was attached. Brunches, vision board sessions, a group hike, a generational storytelling dinner. I nearly deleted it on the spot. But then Emma peeked over my shoulder, saw the photo of the Lakeview View House, and gasped, "Mom, is that a castle? Can we go?" I hesitated. Every instinct screamed, "No." But my daughter's eyes sparkled. She'd never been to a real Lakeview View house, never had a weekend with cousins, uncles, and grandparents all in one place. And so I lied to myself like we do when we want to protect our children from the truth. It's just one weekend. I thought they've changed. It'll be different now. Spoiler alert. It wasn't. It was the same toxic hierarchy, only this time, it wasn't just me they came for. It was my daughter. The week leading up to the trip, I told myself to stay neutral, polite, civil, and visible. I packed Emma's favorite dresses, her crayons, her headphones, and her stuffed bunny Maple. I made mental notes. Uncle Mike'd engage. Uncle Mike'd react. Uncle Mike'd let them pull you back into their game. Megan, my best friend since college, saw through it immediately. "You really think Alexandra's throwing this legacy weekend for the family?" she asked, eyebrows raised as she sipped coffee across from me. "This is a PR stunt. Rachel, she's branding her family like it's a nonprofit gala. She's trying," I said, "trying to convince myself. Maybe she wants to reconnect." Megan snorted. "Alexandra doesn't reconnect. She reclaims. Big difference." I wanted to laugh, but she was right. My sister didn't do sincerity. She did optics. But Emma had been bouncing around the apartment singing made-up songs about the Lakeview View House and her cousins. She'd even drawn a picture of all of us by the water stick figures holding hands, smiling. So, I packed guilt alongside sunscreen and juice boxes. The drive to the Lakeview View House was nearly 4 hours. Emma sang most of the way. I forced smiles, but my grip on the steering wheel tightened every mile closer to that house. When we pulled up, it was exactly what I expected. Massive white-painted magazine. Perfect. A rental probably, but still staged like royalty lived there. 2 Teslas and a Range Rover sat in the circular driveway. Someone had hired a valet. Emma gasped. It really is a castle. Alexandra greeted us at the door wearing linen coolouts, gold sandals, and that curated smile she used for fundraisers. "Rachel," she said like it physically pained her. "You made it." She gave me an air kiss. Then she knelt to Emma's level. "And this must be the song Bird," she cooed. "You've gotten so big." Emma beamed. I practiced a new song for everyone. Alexandra froze for half a second before recovering. How lovely. Inside, I saw the familiar cast of relatives. Aunt Karen always gossiping. Uncle Don always talking over people. My parents, Charles and Linda, sitting like royalty in the great room. Drinks already in hand. The house was wired with small microphones, which Alexandra's husband Eric explained were for capturing candid family moments for the highlight reel. He handled tech stuff. Alexandra had hired a freelance filmmaker to cut together a sizzle reel of the weekend, like a reality show. I joked. Eric chuckled. She wants to screen it at Christmas. I tried not to cringe when we were shown to our room. The converted mudroom with a cot and no windows. I swallowed the insult. Emma didn't seem to notice. She was too busy talking about which cousin she'd play with first. She didn't know yet that in this house, joy was not just ignored, it was punished. The weekend had barely started, and the hierarchy had already been established. Alexandra was the star walking around with a clipboard and a headset like she was producing a live television event. She barked orders at the caterers, smoothed her dress every time someone took a photo, and made sure the camera always caught her laughing, hugging, or pretending to listen. Meanwhile, Emma and I were treated like afterthoughts. At dinner the first night, a catered 3-course meal served on long banquet tables under twinkle lights. We were seated at the far end next to the kids and the less important cousins. Alexandra sat beside our parents in the center, surrounded by everyone she considered worth impressing. Uncle Mycor's board members, high-profile friends, and her husband's colleagues. Emma had worn her yellow sundress, the one with embroidered stars, and spent the first half of the meal trying to be noticed. She offered to sing her song. She complimented Aunt Karen's earrings. She even tried to join a conversation about the Lakeview view by saying, "I saw a frog outside." No one responded. Her voice fell into silence like a stone into a bottomless well. My parents made no effort to help. My mom gave a tight smile and said, "Let the grown-ups talk, sweetheart." My dad was too busy bragging about Alexandra's latest TV interview on a local news segment. "You know," he said, swirling wine in his glass, "they want her to do a TEDx talk next year on legacy and leadership. Beautiful theme, isn't it?" Alexandra smiled like a queen receiving tribute. I stayed quiet. I had learned not to challenge their narrative, not unless I wanted to be called jealous, bitter, ungrateful, or worse. Emma leaned over to me and whispered, "Mom, why does Grandma only talk to Aunt Alexandra?" I squeezed her hand. "Because sometimes grown-ups forget how to share attention." She nodded solemnly like she understood more than she should. Later that night, in our cramped room, I found her coloring quietly by the door. "What are you drawing?" I asked. She held up the picture. It was our family, just like the one she drew at home, but this time we were standing in a corner far from everyone else. "They don't want us in the middle," she said matter-of-factly. "So, I put us over here." My throat tightened. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that we belonged, that blood meant inclusion. But I couldn't lie. Not after everything I'd seen. Instead, I kissed the top of her head and said, "Thank you for making space for us, even when they won't." She smiled completely unbothered, but I was bothered. I was furious because the patterns I thought I had escaped were circling back only now. They had found a new target, and I wasn't going to let that happen again. The next morning started with fresh waffles, curated music, and more fake smiles. Alexandra floated from table to table like a hostess at a political fundraiser, kissing cheeks and laughing too loudly at stories that weren't funny. Meanwhile, Eric continued setting up mics and repositioning cameras. Emma wore her pink cardigan and carried her coloring book. She tugged at my hand as we entered the great room where brunch was being served. "Can I sing today?" she whispered. "The new song I made up." I hesitated. My instinct said no to protect her, to keep her safe in the margins. But then I looked at her face, hopeful, beaming, so eager to share joy. I nodded. "Just wait for a good moment." She beamed and skipped toward the kids' table near the window, her crayons clutched in one hand, her stuffed bunny in the other. The adults were already 2 mimosas deep by the time Emma began humming, then singing a soft, lilting tune about stars and sunlight and dancing animals. Pure 6-year-old magic. At first, no one noticed, but then Alexandra's eyes twitched. She glanced toward the sound, forced a smile, and kept chatting with my dad. But Emma's voice grew louder, more confident. She hit a high note and giggled mid. That's when Alexandra's smile dropped. "Rachel," she called across the table. Voice, sugary and sharp. "Could you maybe ask your daughter to lower her voice a little? Some of us are trying to talk." I opened my mouth to respond gently diplomatically when Emma, unaware of the tension, launched into the chorus, and that's when it happened. Alexandra stood her chair scraped hard against the floor. She walked briskly across the room past the clinking glasses and paused conversations right up to Emma, and before I could move, before anyone could blink, she raised her hand and slapped my daughter across the cheek. The room went silent. Even the string music on the speaker seemed to falter. Emma dropped her crayon. Her hand flew to her face, her eyes wide and shocked, searched for mine. And then Alexandra said loud and clear, her voice echoing across the great room, "Like mother, like daughter, both are useless." She laughed, not a nervous chuckle, a full, unapologetic, delighted laugh. My father leaned back in his chair, smirked, and added, "Well, she needed to learn some shame." My mother sipped her drink, not even looking up. I was frozen for a single second, and then I wasn't. I crossed the room in 5 steps and scooped Emma into my arms. Her face was burning red, her body shaking with confusion and hurt. I looked at Alexandra. I looked at my father, and I said loud enough for everyone to hear, "You just made the biggest mistake of your life," because what they didn't know, what they never thought to consider, was that the microphone in the chandelier was on, and everything had just been recorded. The silence after Alexandra's slap wasn't relief. It was tension, charged, awkward, heavy. Emma was sobbing into my shoulder now, her tiny hands fisted in my cardigan. Her cheek was bright red. Her voice, the one that used to echo through every room we'd ever been in, was now reduced to hiccups and whimpers. Alexandra stood there, arms crossed, unapologetic. She didn't even glance at the camera, sitting 5 feet away from her. "Well," she said with a shrug, "someone had to do it." I turned slowly to face her. "You hit a 6-year-old for singing," Alexandra scoffed. "You call that singing." Then my father chimed in again, folding his napkin like he hadn't just watched his granddaughter get slapped. "Discipline builds character. You were never disciplined enough. Rachel, that's why you ended up alone." Something in me snapped, but not in the way they expected. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I stood up straighter, and I looked straight at Eric, Alexandra's husband, who was frozen by the corner with a remote still in his hand. "Eric," I said clearly, "is the mic still recording?" He didn't speak. He just gave the faintest nod. Alexandra paused. What are you talking about? The documentary mic, I said calmly. You said it records ambient audio. You told me earlier it was hooked up to catch natural family moments. Remember? Alexandra looked toward the chandelier, then to the hallway, then to Eric. You wouldn't, she began. But he was already moving quietly, carefully, unplugging the receiver. That's when she panicked. Eric, I swear to God, if you give her that. He didn't respond. He didn't look at her because for the first time, maybe ever, Eric had seen something that crossed a line even he couldn't ignore. You slapped a child on camera, he said softly, and you laughed about it. My mother finally stood. Oh, don't be dramatic. It was just a tap. I turned to her. A tap that left a mark. A tap that made my daughter cry. A tap you watched and defended. Eric met me in the hallway 20 minutes later. I was packing our overnight bag. Emma was curled up on the bed, clutching her bunny, her cheeks still damp. He held out a small black USB drive. This is a copy of the raw audio. The camera footage goes to the editor next week, but I figured you'd want this. I looked at him stunned. Why? He hesitated. Because she's my niece, too, and no child should ever be humiliated for being joyful. I took the drive. That's when I knew this wasn't just a bad weekend anymore. This was evidence. They had finally made the mistake of hurting someone who had a voice. And this time, I wasn't going to let them twist it, bury it, or blame it on me. This time, I had proof. And what I did next, it wouldn't just shake my sister's curated world, it would burn the mask right off her legacy. By the time Emma and I pulled out of the driveway, the sun had barely passed the Triine. No one tried to stop us. Not Alexandra, not my parents, not a single cousin or aunt or uncle. The Carter family had seen a slap. I had seen a fracture, but they hadn't seen the rest of it. Not yet. We drove straight to Megan's. Emma was quiet in the back seat, her cheeks still pink from the hit, but she hummed a little, a broken melody of the song she didn't get to finish. I blinked back tears and tightened my grip on the steering wheel. I wasn't running. I was starting at Megan's apartment. I told her everything. She didn't ask questions. She just put on tea, handed me a notebook, and said, "Let's map this out." And that's exactly what we did. The next day, I took Emma to a pediatrician who documented the red mark still faintly visible on her cheek. Then, we met with a child psychologist who gently asked Emma about what happened. Emma said the words slowly like they hurt to say. She said, "My singing was bad. Then she hit me. Then she laughed." The psychologist looked at me, her expression tight. "She's showing signs of acute humiliation. It's good you brought her in now." I added the medical notes to a growing file. Then I opened my laptop. Alexandra had spent years building her public image. Director of a community arts nonprofit, frequent speaker at youth mentorship summits, a self-declared advocate for child confidence through creativity. She posted on LinkedIn about cultivating brave spaces for self-expression. I reread those words while holding the audio file of her slapping a 6-year-old for singing. No rage, no outburst, just method. I wrote 3 professional emails to the board of her nonprofit to the Regional Arts and Schools Initiative, where she was a liaison to the organizers of the Mid-Atlantic Youth Mentorship Conference, where she was scheduled to be keynote speaker next month. Each email was calm, factual, attaching a trimmed, high-quality audio clip from the brunch, the slap her, insult her laugh, and my father's comment about shame. No commentary, just their words. I didn't ask them to fire her. I didn't ask for statements. I simply wrote, "As someone concerned about the emotional safety of children in leadership environments, I felt ethically obligated to share this recording." And I hit send. The first call came the next morning. It was the nonprofit board chair. "We've received a troubling report," she said carefully. "Are you the mother in the audio clip?" "Yes." "And the child, that's your daughter?" "Yes." There was a pause. We've placed Alexandra on administrative leave while we review this. We'll be issuing a public response shortly. 2 hours later, the mentorship conference emailed. They were reconsidering her suitability for keynote programming. By day's end, her profile on the school initiative site had been taken down. Alexandra, of course, found out fast. The texts started rolling in first from her, then from my mother. Alexandra, what did you do? You're ruining my reputation. Mom, Rachel, this is family business. You didn't have to go public. Alexandra, again, you think this makes you a hero. You're vindictive, bitter as always. I didn't respond. I didn't need to because the world she'd carefully built, the one full of staged smiles and borrowed morality, was finally cracking. And it wasn't because I told a lie. It was because I told the truth for the first time in my life. Silence felt like power. I didn't post the audio online. I didn't write some scathing essay. I didn't even respond to Alexandra's desperate emails, which had quickly shifted from furious to pleading. I let the facts do the talking. The nonprofit issued a statement. We are committed to environments where all children feel safe and heard. In light of recent concerns, Miss Carter has been placed on indefinite leave. It was short, clinical, brutal in its finality. The mentorship summit replaced her name on the speaker list within 48 hours. And Emma? She began to sing again quietly at first in the bathtub in the hallway. Then one night, she sang while brushing her teeth the same song she never got to finish that day. I didn't cry until I left the bathroom. A few days later, the phone calls started. Not from Alexandra, not from my parents, from other family members. My cousin Evan called and said softly, I was sitting 3 chairs away. I saw everything. I should have said something. I'm sorry. My Uncle Steve emailed to say he had seen Alexandra push his son into a cabinet once for making too much noise, and he hadn't spoken up. Even Aunt Karen, usually too busy gossiping about everyone to care about. Anyone left a voicemail saying, I used to think Alexandra was just stern, but now I think I watched her turn into your father. Those words stuck to my ribs. I didn't forgive them all immediately. Some I didn't respond to, but for the first time, the cracks in our family structure weren't coming from me. They were coming from people who had always been silent. Megan hosted a small dinner for what she jokingly called my real family. Emma helped bake the cornbread. Eric came too without Alexandra. I wasn't surprised. He handed Emma a new sketch pad and looked me in the eye. I'm sorry I didn't step in sooner. I nodded. You did the most important thing. You turned on the mic. That night, Emma sat on the couch between me and Megan sketching a picture of a house. This time, we weren't in the corner. We were in the center smiling. My mother called again the next morning. We need to talk, she said curtly. About what? You've torn this family apart. I laughed. Not out of cruelty, out of clarity. No, Mom, I just refused to keep taping it back together. She hung up and I stared at the phone and realized something profound. I didn't feel small anymore. For the first time since I was a child, I had said no and meant it. Not for revenge for Emma, for the voice they tried to silence, and the one I was just beginning to find. 6 weeks after the slap, I hosted something I never thought I would. Not a confrontation, not a campaign, but a celebration. A small one in our apartment, just people who showed up when it mattered. Megan brought her famous peach pie. Eric came with his son, quiet, wide-eyed, and polite. Evan and Aunt Karen arrived with armfuls of flowers and juice boxes. Even Dr. Hayes, Emma's child therapist, dropped by for 10 minutes just to say, You're doing everything right. Emma was glowing. She wore a blue dress and had placed star stickers on her cheeks like freckles. At some point, she slipped away from the snacks and walked toward the center of the room with quiet determination. Mom, she whispered, tugging on my sleeve. Can I sing now? I froze for a second, part awe, part fear. You don't have to, I said gently. Only if you want to. I want to, she said. I practiced. The room quieted as Emma stepped onto our living room rug like it was a stage. She began to sing. Not the cartoon theme song from that awful weekend. This was new. Something she'd written herself. A gentle melody about strong hearts and stars that still shine even when clouds try to hide them. Her voice was soft at first, then stronger, clearer, confident, and I cried. Not because I was sad, because I was witnessing healing in real time. The arc of pain to power in 6-year-old form. When she finished, everyone clapped. Eric had tears in his eyes. Megan mouthed, "She's magic." I knelt down, hugged her tight, and whispered, "You have the bravest voice I've ever heard." Later that night, after everyone had gone, I sat on the couch with a blanket around my shoulders and the remains of joy still lingering in the air. Empty glasses, music notes, soft laughter echoing in my head. My phone buzzed, a message from Alexandra. Just 2 words. "You win?" I stared at it for a moment, then deleted it. Because this wasn't about winning. It was about breaking a cycle that had kept generations of women in our family small, quiet, and bruised by shame masked as discipline. Alexandra had tried to silence Emma. My parents had laughed. And in that moment, they taught me the most important lesson of my life. That family is not built on blood. It's built on protection, on listening, on showing up, and that sometimes to save your child and yourself, you have to burn the old blueprint and draw your own map with crayons, with voice, with